Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so in the 8th juz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says towards the end of the juz, وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ قَدْ جَاءَتْكُمْ بَيِّنَةٌ مِّن رَّبِّكُمْ فَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, and to the people of Madian, we sent their brother Shu'aib as a messenger. So Madian, this area is located in the northwest of Arabia. This is towards Tabuk. So Shu'aib alayhi salam was sent to the people of Madian in that region. So, and to the people of Madian, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verse number 85 in Surah A'raf, the heights, that we sent their brother Shu'aib as a messenger, and his message was that, O my people, worship Allah alone. Worship Allah alone. U'budullah ma lakum min ilahin ghayru. That, O my people, worship Allah alone. You don't have any God other than Him. And truly clear proof upholding my message has come to you from your Lord. So equitably fill the measure and the balance in your trade, and that you shall not defraud the people of their rightful things, nor shall you spread corruption in the earth after it has been set straight by Allah. This is best for you if indeed you are believers. So now, just reflecting over this verse, a few things come to mind. That number one, there is an anecdote of a person looking for his lost pearl under a street lamp, whereas the pearl was lost in the house. Now, based on this anecdote, how is it possible to find the ideals of Islamic finance in a conventional finance system? Because this verse, it's related to and it's specific to those involved in trade, commerce, and business. And one of the things that the nation of Shu'aib alayhi salam, they were guilty of, was that they were not honest when it came to filling their measures and balance in their trade. They were dishonest. They were dishonest businessmen. They were people who were involved in a lot of fraudulent behavior. They didn't have ethics. They didn't have standards, and they weren't honest when it came to conducting their business transactions. So Shu'aib alayhi salam, and this is in addition to them not believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Shu'aib alayhi salam was sent as a prophet by Allah to tell them that first and foremost, you have to believe in Allah. And after belief in Allah, you have to be honest when you measure. You have to be honest when you weigh food. You can't defraud the people, because this is a type of corruption. So we have to understand that when we are involved in any kind of business, when we are involved in any kind of transaction, we have to make sure that we follow the ethics and standards of Islam. There is a rich heritage of Islamic finance in the Quran and in the Hadith. Just in the Quran, there is approximately 35 verses just on Islamic finance. There's just, let that weigh in. 35 verses on Islamic finance. 23 years of wahi ended with a verse discussing the rights of creditors and compassion to those who are in debt, the debtors. And there is approximately, just in Bukhari alone, forget the other books of hadith, but just in Bukhari alone, there is 471 ahadith on economics alone in Bukhari. Let aside the other ahadith books that we know of. So the Sharia, it doesn't prohibit us from acquiring wealth and enriching ourselves. This is not what the Sharia is there for. The Sharia, it doesn't prohibit us. We have to acquire wealth. We have to enrich our lives as much as possible, so that we're in a position where we can better worship Allah. Because when we are there is relative financial security, then this allows us to concentrate on Allah. This allows us to worship Allah with a full stomach. We don't have to worry about where our next meal is coming from. So the Sharia, it encourages that we go out, we acquire wealth, and that we enrich our lives. And there were many Sahaba who were considered wealthy in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and they gave a lot towards charity. They gave a lot to the cause of Islam. So you have Sahaba such as Zubair bin Awwam, radiallahu anhu. He was extremely wealthy. Abdurrahman bin Auf, radiallahu anh. You have Uthman bin Affan, radiallahu anh. These were very wealthy Sahaba, and even by today's standard, they would supersede the ultra rich. Right? They would supersede the ultra rich because of how wealthy they were. I mean, just Zubair bin Awwam, radiallahu anh, his estate, when he passed away, his estate was worth 2,200,000 gold coins. I mean, let that sink in. 2,200,000 gold coins. I mean, if that's calculated in today's time, it will be approximately $400 million. Now, factor in the inflation, right? And this amount is just unfathomable, right? So if we consider the inflation amount of 1400 years, then I mean this it's a staggering sum. So in spite of the wealth that the Sahaba they had, they were those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about in the Quran in the highest terms, that even though they were wealthy and even though they were considered as ultra rich in their time, and they are ultra rich even now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the Sahaba in the highest terms. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْءٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ يَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا تَتَقَلَّبُ فِيهِ الْقُلُوبُ وَالْأَبْصَارِ. That they were such men. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the Sahaba over here, that they were such men that trade and business and commerce did not make them unmindful of the dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal, establishing salah, dispensing zakat. They feared the day of judgment, the day of qiyamah, when hearts and eyes will turn out of fear. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about Sahaba such as Abdurrahman bin Auf, Uthman bin Affan, Zubair bin Awwam, that although they were wealthy, they never let their wealth, they never let their trade and commerce get in the way of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were always mindful of Allah even when they were involved and engaged in business. Now, we work so hard to build our empires, but we destroy our empires with our own hands by being at times deceitful in our business practices. If we have a business, if we are conducting transactions on a daily basis, then we have a responsibility to ensure that what we are providing, the services that we are providing, the manufacturing that we are doing, whatever we are selling, it is of the highest ethics and standards. And these ethics and standards, this is something that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us in the ahadith. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the Quran has encouraged us to do. As I've mentioned, there is in the Quran approximately 35 verses just on Islamic finance, and 23 years of wahi ended with a verse discussing the rights of creditors and debtors. And just 471, there's 471 ahadith on economics in Bukhari alone, let alone the other books of ahadith. But in Bukhari alone, there's approximately 471 hadith on Islamic finance. Now, it's important that there are some issues that are common in the business sector. It requires reformation, and that reformation, it revolves around honesty and business ethics. That we have to understand that when it comes to our businesses, when it comes to transactions, if we are employed by someone, then we have a responsibility to be honest. We have to have ethical standards as defined by Islam, because the ethical standards of Islam, they promote an element where nothing will end in any kind of argument or acrimony. Because what happened, and this is what Islam tries to avoid. Islam tries to avoid argumentation. It tries to avoid quarreling, where a business transaction goes awry, and then people they start arguing with one another. So Islam, what it has measures in place that we have to conduct ourselves with the highest standards when we are involved in our business dealings. Now, what is halal and what is haram? This too, Islam has delineated. The books of Islamic finance, it has delineated that we need to understand before we involve ourselves in business, that okay, what exactly is halal, what exactly is haram. Sometimes another thing that has a negative impact or influence on our business is pride and arrogance. That a person, I've heard of a story where a millionaire, he lost his wealth in his lifetime. Why? Because he would make this claim that, I have enough wealth that my grandchildren can live off of it. So he lost everything. I mean, a person shouldn't make claims like this. This is just out of pride and out of arrogance when a person makes such claims that, my wealth is going to outlive my great great grandkids. So this is pride and this is vanity. One should not make such claims. Rather, one should attribute this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enabled me to amass this wealth for the benefit of my family, and for the salvation of the salvation of me in the hereafter. And this is what we should be focused on, that our wealth, in a manner of speaking, what it does is that it provides us, when spent correctly, this will be a salvation for us in the hereafter. Another thing to keep in mind is that sin, an immoral act, this also has a negative influence on our wealth. One of my friends in South Africa, they told me that a multi-millionaire, he shared his personal experience of losing all of his wealth. Why? Because he was involved in immoral acts. So this is another thing that has a negative impact on our rizq, on our sustenance, that when we are involved in immoral deeds, when we are involved in different types of sins, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. Another thing to keep in mind is that when we are in the business sector, sometimes what happens, and this is very common in industrialized nations, is that there's monopolization of the market. That what happens is that when we have carved out our niche in a market, then we become at times an obstacle for newcomers into the market. And as businessmen, people who are involved in business, they should unite and they should support one another. One of the amazing things that I seen when I was a student in Pakistan was that the same type of business was commonly found on one street. So if there were, for example, flower shops for weddings, you had so many flower shops on the same street. So there were so many choices that a person can make. If there was a bookshop, then you had so many bookshops just on that one street. So you had an abundance of choices. So there was no monopolization of market. And this is a very important thing to keep in mind. Even when it came to clothing, when it came to clothing, then you have a whole series of shops where people were selling clothes. And as a consumer, you have so many choices to select from. So there was no monopolization of the market. And this is a very important thing, that when there's a newcomer into business, then businessmen, they should unite and they should support each other. And rizq, we should understand, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And this is our yaqeen, this is our belief, that rizq and sustenance comes from Allah alone. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he has praised the businessmen in the highest terms, that the businessmen, they will be with the siddiqeen, with the shuhada, with the anbiya. Why? Because the businessmen, they have a responsibility to speak honestly, to speak truthfully, and honesty and trustworthiness. These were hallmarks of the anbiya. The anbiya, they were always honest when they would give da'wah. The siddiqeen, they were always honest when they acknowledged the miracles of the anbiya. They believed it from their heart. The people who died in the way of Allah, the martyrs, they were honest in upholding the standards of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So similarly, the businessmen too, they have opportunity after opportunity to be deceitful, to lie. But what do? They opt to be worshipful. They opt to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They decide to remember the standards that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has set, and they follow these standards. They follow these standards to the letter, and they adopt in their business honesty, truthfulness, trustworthiness. And these are the characteristics of the prophets. These are the characteristics of the Siddiqeen, the truthful people. These are the characteristics of the shuhada, the martyrs who died in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has talked about the businessmen in the highest of terms, because that they will be resurrected on the day of Qiyamah with this with the Anbiya, with the Siddiqeen, with the Shuhada, because they conducted business in accordance to the laws of Allah, in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is what this verse is saying in verse number 85 in Surah A'raf, which translates to the heights, that وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره قد جاءتكم بينة من ربكم فأوفوا الكيل والميزان ولا تبخسوا الناس أشياءهم ولا تفسدوا في الأرض بعد إصلاحها ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين. And to the people of Madian, we sent their brother Shu'aib as a messenger. And he said that, "O my people, worship Allah alone." So they were guilty of associating partners with Allah. They didn't have any standards, so they were guilty of worshipping beings, deities other than Allah. So Shu'aib alayhi salam said that, "O my people, worship Allah alone. You do not have any God other than Him, other than Allah. And truly, clear proof upholding my message has come to you from your Lord." So equitably, be fair when you're filling the measure. Be fair when you're measuring something by volume, and when you are weighing something in your trade, and that don't defraud the people of their rightful things. So this is a verse that is extremely important for those who are involved in the business sector. Nor shall you spread corruption in the earth. That if we do this, then this is a type of corruption in the earth. This is a type of corruption when we are not honest, when we are deceitful, right? And if we are not truthful and we are not trustworthy, then this is a type of spreading corruption on the earth. After it has been set aright by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is best for you if indeed you are a believer. So this is it, this is the sign and hallmark of true mu'mineen, of true believers, that they don't defraud people, they are honest in their business dealings, they do not spread corruption, and they and these are just some of the signs of the believers. Obviously there's a lot more throughout the Quran, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this particular verse defines the believers as those who are honest in their trade dealings, those who are honest in their business ethics, and they're not trying to defraud the people or rip people off. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. Inshallah, we'll stop over here. If there are any questions, people, brothers and sisters can type them, and I can, inshallah, try to address them. Are there any questions? Feel free to ask, inshallah, whatever questions there may be. So No, I mean, not necessarily the khatira. You can ask whatever question comes to mind. Doesn't necessarily have to be based on the khatira, Brother Usman. So I was looking into before inshallah, whoever wants to write, they can write. So I was looking into the story of Shu'aib alayhi salam, that was Shu'aib alayhi salam, the same Shu'aib alayhi salam uh, that was the father-in-law of Musa alayhi salam. So in Ibn Kathir, there seems to be some ikhtilaf, divergent opinions amongst the scholars, and Ibn Kathir rahimahullah concluded that the Shu'aib that was the father-in-law of Musa alayhi salam, he was different than the Shu'aib alayhi salam that was sent to Madian by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the nation who were involved in deceitful and dishonest trade dealings. So this was an interesting tidbit while I was preparing for today's khatara. I was trying to figure out where Madian was, and I found out that Madian is northwest, close to the Red Sea, close to where the Prophet ﷺ conducted the Tabuk expedition, and that's where Shu'aib alayhi salam was sent. And the Shu'aib alayhi salam that was the father-in-law of Musa alayhi salam, this was a different Shu'aib alayhi salam. There was two separate, because that Shu'aib alayhi salam was more close to the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And this Shu'aib of Musa alayhi salam, who was the father-in-law of Musa, he was someone completely different. So there is nothing conclusive where it's stated explicitly, clearly, that the Shu'aib that was the father-in-law of Musa alayhi salam, it was indeed the Shu'aib that was sent to the people of Madian, who were guilty of the crime of not being honest in their business dealings. Okay. Okay, so the first question, how do you pick which school of thought one should follow? I mean, you know, uh, whatever a person feels comfortable, whatever a person feels comfortable to follow that. Doesn't necessarily have to be the school of thought that happens to be common. The default is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that ati'ullah wa ati'ur rasul wa ulil amri minkum, that obey Allah, obey the Prophet, and ulul amr. So ulul amr means that when you come across a situation, a scenario where a Sharia ruling is required, then you consult with the scholars. So that's where the whole concept of following Sharia rulings comes from. That you ask and you consult with the scholars. So the Sahaba, they would consult with the scholars from amongst the Sahaba, because yes, you had more than you had more than 100,000 Sahaba, more than 100,000 companions, but out of 100,000 companions, there was probably only 20 who were experts and well versed in Islamic law. So the rest of the Sahaba, they would consult with them in whatever they were experts in, wherever their expertise lied. So you have scholars such as Zayd bin Thabit, who was well versed in mirath, in inheritance. So people, they would consult him for mirath and inheritance. You had scholars like Abdullah bin Mas'ud, who was well versed in the Quran because he learned 70 surahs from the Prophet ﷺ directly. So people would consult Abdullah bin Mas'ud when it came to the Quran. Ibn Umar, he was one of the jurists of Medina. So you have Imam Malik rahimahullah. He takes extensively from Ibn Umar radiallahu anh. So if a person looks into the Maliki school, you will see that Imam Malik rahimahullah, He narrates from his teacher Nafi', who narrates from Ibn Umar radiallahu anh. So I mean the phenomenon of how these schools they began, how they started, um, the crystallization, development. I mean, this is a very long topic, but just to keep it simple, you can pick whatever school of thought you feel comfortable with. I mean, there isn't anything set in stone. So whatever you feel comfortable with, you follow that, inshallah. Uh, Islam, I'm assuming that this applies to work hours as well, but sometimes it's very difficult to be working the whole time you're on the clock. What should be done in this case? I mean, when you're a contracted employee, then in that case, what you can do is that as long as you're completing your work, that whatever work has been allotted to you, and you're completing that work, and you are fulfilling the haqq, the right of that work, that is sufficient, inshallah. That will exonerate you, and you will not, a person will not fall within the parameters of the Quran and Hadith that this person is being deceitful. The main issue is that a person completes his work. He does work in a manner which fulfills the haqq and the right of that work, whatever responsibility has been allotted to him. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an amana, right? It's something that has been entrusted to us, and as Muslims, we need to fulfill that trust. Any other questions? Wayakum, Brother Zain. Any other questions before we sign off? So I understand that 15 minutes we'll just go over. I mean, it's a little bit difficult to go over each and every single verse, but what we can do is just take a verse from the Quran, which is from the juz, which is relevant to our present day situation and what the Muslim Ummah is experiencing, and just kind of elaborate on that, and hopefully we can try to implement it in our lives. If you choose a school of thought to follow, do you abide with just that one? Yes, I think it would be safest to follow one school of thought. It just makes things easier, and it doesn't bring one to a situation where a person becomes completely confused. I mean, if we look through classical Islam, I think I've mentioned this in my question and answer session before the month of Ramadan. So we see the development of the schools and where those schools they flourished, where they thrived. So you have, places like Transoxiana. So this is past the Oxus River. So places like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, all of the Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, this area of Iran, Iraq, India, Pakistan, Turkey, Syria. That's where you see, and parts of Egypt, that's where you see the Hanafi school thriving, and they developed in these regions. So many scholars, they come from this region. Then you have, and one of the primary reasons why they thrived is because the majority of the caliphates, the Abbasids, they had employed Abu Yusuf, who was the student of Abu Hanifa, as the chief judge. So because he was the chief judge, the Hanafi school, it flourished. Now, with the Shafi school, they flourished in Egypt. Imam Shafi rahimahullah, after he learned from Imam Muhammad, who too was the student of Imam Abu Hanifa, he relocated to Misr. He relocated to Egypt, and that's where he crystallized and developed his school. He had amazing students, and the Shafi school became prominent in Egypt and in Yemen. Then you have the Maliki school. The Maliki school, because Yahya bin Yahya al-Laythi, he was the student of Imam Malik rahimahullah. He took the Muwatta of Imam Malik rahimahullah, and he took it all the way to Andalus. So he came to Medina from Andalus. He listened to the Muwatta of Imam Malik. This is a very famous hadith work of Imam Malik. And he took it to Andalus, present day Spain. And from there, the madhab of Imam Malik rahimahullah, it spread. So this is why you have in West Africa, and once upon a time in Spain. So you have West Africa, so you have Morocco, Tunisia, Aljazair, Algeria, Libya, Mauritania. You have Nigeria. These places are predominantly regions where the Maliki school is practiced. So there's a lot of uh, geopolitical areas where just geographical areas where the school spread, because sometimes it was the location, sometimes it was because the chief judges happened to be of a particular school, or sometimes it was just students, the students of a particular school. They were just experts when it came to spreading the knowledge of their teacher. So I mean, I would say that it's just more simple to follow one school, because if you go and ask one scholar, let me give you an example. That if you go and ask one scholar that if I touch a woman, I've done wudu, and if I touch a woman, then does my wudu break? So that scholar will say, no, it doesn't break. Your wudu doesn't break. Your wudu still stands. And it is the opinion of scholars that if a person touches a woman, then the wudu breaks. And this is the opinion of Imam Shafi rahimahullah. This is the opinion of Imam Malik rahimahullah. Yes, there are some conditions here and there, but according to them, with those conditions, yes, wudu does break. Now, if a person were to ask that same scholar that, okay, does blood, if blood comes out, if I bleed, does that break my wudu? Now, that same scholar will say that yes, it does break the wudu. And if you go and ask another scholar, he will say that no, it doesn't break the wudu. But now the scholar who holds the opinion that touching a woman breaks wudu, and when blood comes out, then that doesn't break wudu. Then what that does is that just mixes up two different opinions from two different schools. So then what is a person going to do in that kind of situation? So it becomes very it becomes confusing for the one who doesn't have any expertise when it comes to the Sharia, when it comes to Islamic law. So I would say it's more easier to follow one school and to stick with that one school. It just saves a person from a lot of trouble. And it's not something that we're going to be asked about in the grave. So if a person decides that, what, I can't wrap my mind around this, so I'm not going to follow any school. So it's not like somebody's going to be judged by Allah in the akhirah based on this. As long as a person is sincere when it comes to consulting with someone, and he's not looking for the easiest thing to follow. A common issue today is that people are just looking to follow the easiest. They're looking to follow the easiest opinion, and perhaps that may not be the best thing to follow the easiest opinion all the time. It's very likely that the easiest opinion may not be the correct opinion. You have recently I came across an article where it's permissible for the woman to lead the salah for men, and she will do it from behind. So the men will stand forward, and the woman, she will lead the salah from behind. Yes, this is an opinion in the Hanbali school. It's a valid opinion in the Hanbali school, but it's not the preferred opinion. It's not the preferred opinion. And the rest of the schools, the Hanafi school, the Maliki school, and the preponderant opinion in the Shafi school, they disallow the woman from becoming an imam and leading the people. Even in the Hanbali school, there's so many restrictions and conditions. And that restriction and condition is that the woman has to be well versed in the Quran, and she has to be leading men who are unable to recite the Quran at all. So, in this situation, it would be permissible according to the Hanbali school with all of these conditions. But when they issue any kind of edict, what happens is that they omit all of the conditions and they just take one aspect of the religious edict and they tell people this is okay to follow. I mean, to me, this is shoddy scholarship. It's irresponsible. If you're going to convey the opinion of any school, of any scholar, then you have to be honest. You have to be honest. There has to be academic honesty in whatever you're telling people. You can't just go and obfuscate and conceal what the conditions are, conceal what the scholar is trying to convey. So anyway, just back to your question, I went off on a tangent over here. Yeah, if you choose a school of thought to follow, then yes, I think it would be better just to abide by following one school, and this will just make life easier for you and for everyone who is involved. Or just follow a scholar who you trust. Follow the scholar who you trust. I mean, whoever you trust, whether it's someone over here, whether it's someone back home, follow that scholar. And most likely, I mean, there's no, to be honest with you, there is no scholar in the world who has the capabilities of being a mujtahid, of going through the thousands of hadith and going through the hundreds of tafasir and trying to come up with his own original opinion. I mean, if there's any scholar like that in the world, then I'd like to know him. But to be honest with you, I don't think any scholar like that really exists. They may be experts in one particular issue, but that doesn't mean they might be experts in all of them. They too are following their own school of thought. I mean, majority of the scholars, this is what they have done. If we go through the past 1300, 1400 years, all of the scholars, they attributed themselves towards one school and they wrote books on that one school. I mean, the books that you're looking in the background, these were all scholars who contributed to their respective schools. You have scholars like, I mean, in the Hanafi school, you have Mulla Ali Qari. He was an 11th century Hanafi scholar from Herat, present day Afghanistan. And he was a Hanafi scholar. And he flourished. He flourished by writing just on topics that were related to the Hanafis. You know, I have a a book on the methodology of Imam Shafi, how he sifts through the authentic hadith versus the unauthentic hadith. So this is that book, Tadribul Rawi, where it discusses hadith. You have books such as let's see, what do we have over here? Yeah, we have. I have a Qala'id al-Iqyan. This is a book written by a Hanbali scholar on the Uthmani Dawla, on the Ottoman Empire. So this is this book, Qala'id al-Iqyan fi Ali Uthman. So the book, he was 11th century scholar, Mar'i al-Karimi al-Hanbali, rahimullah, a great Hanbali scholar from Damascus. So he wrote on the virtues of the Ottoman Empire. So he discusses, you know, their contributions, their how they intellectually contributed, how they spiritually contributed towards the upliftment of the Muslim Ummah. Okay, Brother Bilal is asking a question. I know you said following an opinion shouldn't just be based on easiness, but can you follow a school of thought as a whole, which is easier in certain issues that are? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, of course you can. You can follow a school of thought that is relevant to you, that is easier for you. Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it's not like, if there are extenuating circumstances, difficult circumstances, yes, you can go out of the school, and you can follow that school's opinion. But in normal circumstances, in normalcy, it's better just to follow one school. But yes, if things become difficult, if there are circumstances where there is a requirement to follow a different school, yes, by all means, it's okay. to follow that different school. But this is where the opinion of a scholar would come into play. So that scholar will be he will be able to tell you that, okay, uh, these are extenuating circumstances, these are a little bit difficult, it's okay for you to follow a different school. So in that case, it's okay. And this has been done by classical scholars throughout centuries, where they would adopt the view of the other school because of ease. I mean, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimullah did that. I mean, here's an interesting story about this. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he speaks about the woman who loses her husband. So her husband gets lost, and she doesn't know his whereabouts. Now, how long does this woman have to wait before she gets married? I mean, this is a very valid question, right? How long does this woman need to wait to get married again? So, according to Abu Hanifa, and this is a very difficult opinion to follow. Again, we have to be practical. So, according to Abu Hanifa, and of course, this nobody gives fatwa on this. No one gives this. No one gives an edict based on the opinion of Abu Hanifa. He said that she would have to wait 60 to 70 years. I mean, 60 to 70 years, this woman is going to get old. She needs someone to take care of her. She needs a companionship. Hey, let's be practical over here. And Abu Hanifa rahimullah, he based this on the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that a'maru ummati bayna sittin wa sab'in, that the age span, the lifespan of my ummah is between 60 to 70. So this woman has to wait for 60, 70 years before she gets married. She doesn't know, this poor woman doesn't know the whereabouts of her husband. So she has to wait for 60, 70 years. So the Hanafi school doesn't take this opinion. Rather, they take the opinion from Imam Malik rahimahullah, who says that this woman will wait for 4 years. She will wait for 4 years. And this was the opinion of Umar radiallahu anh. That Umar radiallahu anh said that when a woman loses her husband, meaning that she doesn't know the whereabouts of her husband, she doesn't know where he is, then all she does is she waits for 4 years, after which she can get married again. So, I mean, again, practically, this makes more sense than the Hanafi school. So there are instances where the schools have taken from other schools based on ease. It's just as neophytes, as people who don't have an understanding of how to follow an opinion. It's important that we, just take one school, follow that, make our lives easier. If there are special circumstances, then yes, we can leave our school and follow that opinion based on those circumstances. And if those for example, yes, in the Shafi'i school, as I said, touching women, this would break the wudu. So the Shafi'i school, they give fatwa on the Hanafi school that during Hajj, where it's very common for men and women to be close to one another, and there's a high risk, there's a high possibility that we are going to accidentally touch women while we are doing tawaf. I mean, this, because everybody is just so bunched up together. So in this situation, even the Shafi school, they've given fatwa on the Hanafi school that, okay, during Hajj time, you don't have to go and repeat your wudu, you don't have to renew your ablution after when you're doing tawaf and you accidentally touch someone, you accidentally touch the opposite gender. So there are a lot of instances like this. There are a lot of examples in the Hanafi school, in the Shafi school, in the Maliki school. And this was something that at one time I took an interest in when I was a student. But once you hit the age of 40, then you have other priorities. So me personally, at one time, I was the type of person who just followed, whatever, the easiest opinion. And I used to, my habit was that I used to find the most outlandish of opinions and say that this is an opinion. A scholar said that, and as long as the scholar is saying that and he's validating it, he's providing the evidences, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with following it. But then, with years comes, some form of wisdom. So then I just came to the conclusion it's just more easier to follow to follow one school rather than putting yourself in a situation where you just get confused. Any other questions? Okay, so we can sign off for today, inshallah. If inshallah we'll continue tomorrow. Jazakumullah khairan for stopping by, listening. Inshallah, if there are any requests for a particular verse, I think tomorrow is the 9th juz. If there are any requests for a particular verse, then inshallah you could send me a direct message and I can elaborate on that verse. I always try to find one relevant verse from the juz that is being recited and that's elaborate on that. But if there are any requests for tafsir or reflections on a specific verse, inshallah, let me know. Feel free to get in touch with me. You can message me directly or just message me on Facebook, whatever works, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.